She walked among scattered chicken bones, plastic bags torn by the wind, and rusted cans reflecting the cold light of a lonely street lamp. She had no name, no voice, no one. Just another stray cat in a world that didn't care. The city she roamed was made of cracked concrete and forgotten corners, a jungle of metal where cars roared like predators and humans passed by like hurried ghosts, blind to the golden eyes hiding in the shadows. Her fur, once white, was now stained with soot and dust. Patches of it were missing, and yet she walked with grace, with dignity, with a silent strength that only those who have lost everything know how to carry. She was resistance itself on four legs, the scent of old frying oil, the distant sound of shattering glass, the growl of trucks rumbling far away, all signs that this was not a safe night. But all nights were like this. For her, survival wasn't extraordinary. It was routine. It was every minute. She had starved until her bones ached, been kicked away from bakeries, markets, and workshops. She had given birth and lost, had felt the weight of death around her, and learned not to trust, not even other animals. And still, there was something inside her that hadn't broken, a thin thread of maternal instinct, vibrating in silence, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Life hadn't finished with her yet, and she hadn't finished with life. That night, as she searched for scraps in an overturned dumpster, something shifted inside her, a twitch in her belly, a dry tightness in her body, a discomfort that wasn't pain, but a calling. Heat had passed, and now the seed of life stirred within. Slowly, she left the street, guided by an ancestral instinct, an invisible map only mothers know. She needed shelter, silence, a space where the world couldn't reach. Her wounded paws stepped over the cracked pavement with precision. She sniffed the alleys with caution, passed behind a mechanic's garage, slipped beneath a broken gate until she reached what remained of an old house, abandoned, dark, damp, but safe. Inside there was dust, there was mold, there was silence, and that was exactly what she needed. She didn't know the name of that place, but to her, it would be the nest. She walked slowly, circling the crumbling walls, sniffing every corner as if mapping the future. Her eyes still sparkled, dulled by time but unextinguished. She chose a spot between two fallen beams where a piece of old blanket served as lining. She lay down there, belly pulsing, body trembling, and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about fleeing or fighting or hunting. She was thinking about protecting, because now she was no longer alone. Inside her, 7 tiny hearts beat in haste, and before they were even born, they were already everything she had. Outside, the city burned in its indifferent haste. Cars crossed avenues, people ran to catch buses, doors slammed shut, radios played, and no one knew that, in that moment, a forgotten cat had become a mother in a concrete hideout. No one knew a heroic story was about to begin, because great acts don't start with applause. They begin in silence, in the dark, in abandonment. And it's in those places that the strongest mothers awaken. The dawn fell like a steel veil over the city. The rain, which had whispered on rooftops until then, began to thicken, as if the skies wanted to wash away everything men had left to rot. In the middle of the abandoned lot where a house once stood, only rubble remained, cracked pillars, loose bricks, and twisted iron beams that groaned in the wind. It was a place where rats hid, where mold climbed the walls like cobwebs, and where no one dared to enter, and no one except her. The cat, drenched to the bone, trembled as she bent down to lick her newborns. They could not yet see the world, but they already felt her warm, steady, unconditional presence. With her snout, she pulled them closer to her, trying to shield them from the chill rising from the ground like an invisible poison. The torn blanket found by chance among the rubble became a nest, a stained square of blood, dust, and love. There, amid the ruins, a family was born. There was no sterility, no comfort, no assistance, but there was the raw force of instinct. With every flash that tore the sky, she curled over their tiny bodies like a shield of flesh and courage. And even exhausted, starving, and injured, she didn't sleep for more than a few seconds. The slightest threat, a sharp sound, a creak in the rotten beams, the rustle of a rat, made her body react on alert, like a sentinel trained by 1,000 lives. She knew that place could collapse. She knew the world outside didn't care, But what she didn't know was that without meaning to, she was already creating a story. On that first night as a mother, between the scent of mold and the constant dripping of water down the walls, she began to name the kittens in silence, with her heart. There was the smallest one, barely able to suckle and shivering non-stop. She would name him Ash, because his fur looked like the fine dust covering the floor. The chubbiest one, who crawled with strength and pushed the others aside to reach the teat, she would call Iron and Strong and Relentless. And then there was the quiet one, the smallest female who didn't cry, only breathed with difficulty. For her, the name would be Rain. And so, without voice, without words, but with soul, she named each one with the language only mothers understand. They had no birth certificates, no owners, no home, but they had a mother, and that was enough. The rain did not stop. Time seemed frozen in that forgotten bubble. Cars moved on, the city lights blinked. Humans slept in their warm, dry beds. And there, among twisted metal, a cat fought for every second of her children's lives. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her stomach rumbled like a muffled drum, but she didn't move. Every departure could be the last, every absence could be fatal. She had learned this on the streets. Death comes fast for the small, and hers were the smallest of all. As the night stretched on, the nest began to soak. Water leaked through the cracks in the roof and dripped directly onto the blanket. She looked up, calculating her next move. If she left now, the kittens would be exposed. But if she didn't, they could all get sick from the cold. So slowly, eyes squinting from pain and the weight of an impossible choice, she began dragging pieces of wet newspaper, scraps of cardboard, dirty cloths scattered around the place. One by one, she built a wall around her kittens, a makeshift trench. Then she returned to lie over them, becoming their roof, their wall, their warmth. That night, the cat was no longer just an animal. She was shelter, she was fire, she was fortress. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight didn't bring warmth. They brought smoke, still faint, still far off, but already in the air. The city lit its first cigarettes, its first exhaust fumes, its first scars, and just a few meters away, at the edge of that forgotten lot, an oil drum had started to leak slowly, but she didn't know yet. All she knew was that she had survived her first night as a mother, and she would do it again, every night, every day, until the end. The third day was born pale, as if the sky itself were tired. The city's sounds already pulsed beyond the ruins. Honking horns tangled with street vendor radios, workers argued in dry voices, and a bus spewed black smoke as it turned the corner. But inside that forgotten slice of the world, time moved to a different rhythm. Slow, fragile, small. The mother cat, still aching from giving birth, hadn't slept. Her half-closed eyes followed every breath from her kittens, and her ears caught even the faintest sound. Wood creaking, wind scraping against a shattered window, the dragging of an insect across the wall. There, among rubble and silence, life had begun. The kittens were still blind, but their senses were stirring. They felt the warmth of their mother's body, the smell of milk, the rough texture of the torn blanket. They started to move, clumsy, hungry, searching for food. The first meows, short, hoarse, desperate, rang out like miniature bells, like an ancient cry for help only a mother can understand. She bent down and licked each of their little bodies, cleaning away the dirt of the night, triggering instinct, marking them with her saliva, with her presence, with her love. No mother does this for pride. She does it for survival. If she didn't clean them, their scent would draw rats, dogs, or worse. If she didn't embrace them, the world would devour them within minutes. She had lived long enough to know that. She'd seen other kittens die slowly in cardboard boxes dumped near storm drains, in plazas where children kicked them unknowingly. She had tasted loss. She had failed before, but not this time. This time she would defend each one with her teeth, her claws, her flesh if necessary. The meowing grew louder. Ash cried non-stop. Iron pushed the others aside. Rain remained still, struggling to breathe. The mother shifted between nursing, licking, and warming. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her muscles trembled, but still, she carried on. Hunger was beginning to tear at her sanity. Her milk was drying up. Her belly was empty, and yet her body tried to produce food for 7. 7 mouths, 7 tiny bodies, 7 racing hearts. It was more than she could give, but there was no choice. The mother's hunger was postponed. She would not leave the nest. Not now. She left only once in the hush of afternoon, returning with a chewed bone she found beside an overturned dumpster. There was barely any meat, but she gnawed at it anyway. She ran back to the hideout in a panic. Every second away from her kittens felt like an eternity of risk, an eternity of loss. And when she returned, there they were, all alive, all there. She laid herself over them as if trying to seal them to the floor. And she stayed like that, motionless, even as hunger gnawed at her from the inside like rust. The next day, more meows, stronger meows, the first signs that the kitten's lungs were maturing. The cat recognized it. She knew it meant life. She knew it was good, but she also knew it meant something else. They would start moving more, start leaving the nest, start exposing themselves, start getting lost. And that was terrifying. The world was not built for fragile kittens. Not here. Not in this neighborhood. Not in these ruins. The fire preparing to consume everything had not yet shown its face, but she already sensed it. The scent of smoke, faint, nearly undetectable, was already blending into the dry morning air. That warehouse was being used at night by strange men. Men who lit makeshift torches, drank, poured gasoline on old tires and laughed loudly. The oil drum leaked faster, and the water dripping through the holes in the roof would not be enough to stop what was coming. But she didn't know how to explain that. She just felt it, and the meowing continued. Time marched forward, and with it, the bond between the cat and her kittens grew stronger. She could now distinguish the sound of each one. She knew when it was hunger. She knew when it was cold. She knew when it was fear. Every meow was a code, a request, a life. And every time she responded to those calls with a touch, a muffled purr, a protective gesture, she ceased to be just a cat. She became something greater, something ancestral, something no camera, no human, no vet, no poet could ever fully define. She was a mother. It was a stifling morning, with a sky too gray to be called bright and too heavy to resemble night. The wind, once cold, now blew thick, loaded with something the cat couldn't name, but that made her narrow her eyes and stretch her neck, as if trying to scent a faceless enemy. Her whiskers trembled, her body tensed like a bow about to fire. The kittens slept, piled atop one another, too small to grasp any threat beyond hunger, but she knew, before any sound betrayed it, she felt it. Something in the air had shifted. A sweet, aggressive scent began to creep through the cracks in the structure, a smell that belonged neither to nature, nor to the street, nor to rats, nor to men. It was the fret scent of gasoline. She rose slowly, fur bristling along her spine. Her eyes scanned the surroundings as if expecting a red-eyed beast to emerge from the shadows, but everything looked the same. The same unstable roof, the same rotting beams, the same dirty rags. Yet outside, beyond the peeling walls, men with sweaty faces and torn shirts hauled canisters and hoses. They were preparing something, a planned fire, a criminal disposal, or just the cruel amusement of men. The property owners, who had never once noticed the hidden nest, had hired someone to clear the lot. And in that part of the city, clearing meant burning everything and vanishing fast. The cat, of course, knew none of this, but instinct screamed like thunder. Danger. She moved toward the crack where she usually slipped out at night and peeked. She saw the canisters stacked near a pile of tires. She saw the oil drum glinting in the dull sunlight. She saw cigarettes being lit. And worst of all, she saw tiny flames dancing inside a metal can, used to ignite a chain reaction. Heat was already vibrating in the ground. And the smell was unbearable, like an invisible warning scorching the inside of her nose and making her fur stand on end. She ran back to her kittens. One of them, Kittens, was already trying to crawl. She grabbed him by the scruff and repositioned him in the center of the nest. The others were still asleep, but the mother's unrest rippled through the air like invisible waves. The weakest Hashdas began to meow. The cat lay down again, trying to transmit calm, but calm no longer existed. Every second pushed the world closer to destruction, and her instinct pulled in two opposite directions: stay and protect, or to flee and save. But how could she carry 7 blind, defenseless kittens, one by one, through an alley soaked in gasoline? Time contracted. The drum began to drip faster. the flammable liquid crawling slowly along cement channels, forming a trail that slithered like an invisible snake toward the nest. The cat began sniffing the ground, identifying danger points, trying to track the enemy she couldn't see, because fire, for now, was not fire. It was only a silent threat. But she knew she was surrounded, that something terrible was coming, and deep in her chest a resolute certainty flared. She would not let her children die here. The kittens stirred. The heat increased. The air thinned. The smell of milk and dust that once defined the refuge was giving way to a sweet, deadly haze. The cat paced in circles, panting. She licked each kitten as if saying goodbye. Then she stopped, sat, looked up at the roof. Daylight shimmered above, already trembling as if reflected in a pool of oil. The world as she knew it was about to become smoke. Outside, a crack, a shout, and then the first small explosion. Muffled, like the growl of a monster waking up. The wall beside them shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The kittens cried out in unison, and the mother rose, frozen for a heartbeat, and then leapt toward the exit. She didn't run in panic. She ran to strategize. She ran to map. She ran because she needed seconds, because now time had become her greatest enemy. With the next heartbeat, the flames would be inside the house, and she still had no idea how to save 7 lives. She only knew that she would. The first flash came like a silent lightning bolt. No thunder. A tongue of flame that climbed the dried beams of the outer wall, illuminating from within the cracks, the gaps, the forgotten entrails of that fragile shelter. The fire didn't rush in. It danced. It rose through the splinters of wood like a predator savoring motionless prey. It licked the ceiling like a cursed tongue, melting plastic tiles and dropping incandescent fragments that rained down on old rags and filthy cardboard. The smell changed. From gasoline it turned into scorched flesh, burning fabric, death on the doorstep. And in the center of it all, 7 kittens began to mewl in agony, suffocating on hot air that burned their lungs even before it touched their skin. The mother cat dashed back to the nest like lightning, her eyes wide and pupils contracted into black blades. Instinct took over. There was no time for fear, no time for understanding. Now, time meant action. The first kitten she reached was Rain, the smallest, the quiet one. She grabbed her by the scruff and dragged her to the crack that led outside. There, amid smoke and noise, she placed the trembling body in the farthest corner she could find. There was no rest, no hesitation. Without looking back, she ran inside again. And inside, hell began to open its mouth. The ceiling now rained sparks onto the blanket, its edges smoldering in slow flame. A wall cracked. A dry beam from the rotting frame collapsed inches from the kittens. The floor grew hotter. The cat grabbed Ash, the frail one who barely suckled. His skin already smelled of fire. With effort, she dragged him out, stumbling over embers and shards of glass. This time, her rear left paw struck a glowing sheet of metal, and she didn't scream. She just kept going. Outside, the 2 rescued kittens cried together, like sonic beacons in the darkness. But time was a tyrant. 5 still remained inside, and the air was no longer air. It was thick smoke that clung to the roof of the mouth, burned the eyes and weakened the muscles. But the cat returned. For the 3rd time. Her vision blurred, her fur singed, her breath failing. She found wildna desperately trying to climb the side of the nest. She grabbed him, collapsed, got up, trembled, and moved forward. The nest was collapsing, and she knew. The next trip might be the last. 4 out, 3 in. An impossible choice. The blanket was now ash and fire. Embers danced over tiny bodies. One kitten, the quietest until now, no longer cried, unconscious. She saw him, and for a second, her body froze. Then, she screamed. A sound that wasn't a meow. A sound that tore through the world. A mother's howl, echoing through smoke, steel, and chaos. The kind of sound you never forget, even if no one hears it. And still, she went back. In a 5th, 6th, the last. The fire was no longer a guest. It was the master of the place. The roof was ablaze, collapsing in flames and blocks. The floor cracked, the air boiled. Time was a gasp. The cat, nearly blind from smoke, staggered with the last kitten in her mouth. Her paws faltered. A beam crashed down on her tail. She crawled. Flames licked her flanks. Her whiskers evaporated. Her eyes no longer blinked. But she didn't let go of the kitten. She carried him through the gap with the strength of one who knows only one mission: someone else's survival. She collapsed outside, her body coated in soot, blood, and burns. Around her, all 7 were alive, crying, trembling, but alive. And she lay still. The fire exploded inside the house with a deafening roar. The walls gave way. The roof collapsed. And there, among rubble and embers, lay the body of a mother who was more than a cat. She was a warrior, a storm, a shield, a legend. But she still breathed. Faint, shallow, but she breathed. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The final crack of burning wood, the muffled roar of the collapsing roof, and the spiral of black smoke rising into the sky like a signal. It all happened like a silent explosion, as if even the city held its breath. On the ground, between the mud and the ash, lay the body of the cat, a misshapen mass of scorched fur, curled paws, open burns, and closed eyes. Around her, like shattered satellites, her kittens trembled. They meowed without direction. 7 tiny survivors who didn't understand what had just happened, and among them, the smallest, Ashur, barely moved. His meow was a whisper, his breathing, an invisible thread between life and the end. It was Ashur who drifted first, not by strength, but by accident. The ground still radiated heat from the blaze, and in trying to reach his fallen mother, he slid down a small slope of earth and rolled. The sound of his tiny body hitting a piece of rubble echoed weakly. The cat, who seemed unconscious, moved one ear. A twitch, a signal. She had heard. She had felt. She had recognized. Even at the edge of pain and unconsciousness, the call of a kitten rang louder than any alarm, any siren, any human voice. With supernatural effort, she opened one eye. It was clouded. Her vision flickered between flashes of light and blurred shadows, but she heard. She heard Ash, and then she moved her front paw, then the other. Her body didn't obey. Her joints felt fused from within, and yet she dragged herself, millimeter by millimeter, pain upon pain. Her nose scraped against the hot earth. Her whiskers burned away, her breath short and erratic, but alive, because one kitten had fallen just a few meters away, meters that felt like miles. Ash no longer cried. His body had seemingly given up calling. His eyes remained shut, his ribs visible beneath his thin skin. And then something touched him, the mother's tongue. Rough, burned, but still capable of recognizing. She licked him with strength, as if trying to pull life back into what the world had begun to erase. She nudged him with her snout until a tremor ran through that fragile body. And then a sound, a high-pitched meow, the weakest of all but also the most powerful, because it was the sound of life refusing to leave. The cat grabbed the scruff of Ash's neck with the same precision as always, even wounded, and began to drag him back. The path was short, but every inch felt eternal. The ground was scattered with cooled embers, shards of metal, broken glass, and warm ash. She bled and bled, but she did not let go of the kitten. She brought him back to the others, pulled the bodies together, laid down over them even in raw flesh, and there she stayed, as always, as never before. There was no shelter, no roof, no walls, only her, once again being a home, being resistance, being absolute love. Across the street, an old man pushing a cart of recyclables stopped, his face framed by a white beard, eyes squinting under the morning sun. He saw what no one else had, a pile of rubble, a burned cat, living kittens, and he understood. He let go of the cart, stepped forward slowly and fell to his knees. "My God," he whispered. It was the beginning of the rescue, but for the mother, none of that mattered. All she knew was that Ash was alive, and that was worth more than her entire body. She no longer saw the world as before. Her eyes, clouded by smoke and pain, perceived only smudges of grey and orange, as if the universe had merged with fire. Her hearing, once sharp, was now a muffled sequence of sounds, as if submerged in a sea of soot. And her body was nothing but pain. Her left hind leg dragged like dead weight. The skin beneath her neck was raw, her flanks burned with open wounds, but inside her, something still burned hotter than any real flame, the certainty that she wasn't finished. Because even though she had carried out all her kittens, one by one, something in her instinct screamed that she still had to go back. She staggered. She lay over the kittens, shielding them from the residual heat, the toxic wind, the warm dust still hanging in the air. But then she noticed the absence of a sound, a specific meow, a tone only a mother recognizes. Something was wrong. One of them wasn't there. A mistake? A lapse? A slip of memory? No. She knew. There was no doubt. She had left a kitten behind. Maybe in the confusion. Maybe during the collapse. Maybe when she passed out. And now her heart beat like it was dragging her forward. A drum pounding. Go back. She rose despite having no strength. The white-bearded man who had found her was still there, trying to call someone, pointing at the kittens in disbelief. But she paid him no mind. She passed him with her head low and tail twisted at an odd angle, staggering, determined, toward the embers. He tried to stop her. She growled. It wasn't the growl of anger. It was the sound of a creature with a mission. And missions are not explained. They are fulfilled. The entrance to the house, now reduced to a charred arch, crackled with stress. The ground still smoked. Embers lay scattered, iron shards, chunks of roof that could fall at any second. A human wouldn't go in. A dog would run. A bird would flee. But as to feline mother, she crawls beneath a burning sky if she hears a single sound that might be a lost kitten, and she heard it. A high-pitched sound, shaky, coming from what used to be the kitchen. The path was a maze of agony. Each step made her pores bleed more. The smoke burned her lungs. Her breath came as a hiss, but she moved forward. Every fallen wall was a fortress, every ember a spear, and still she crossed them. The ground slid beneath her, but her gaze stayed fixed. The sound came from there, the back. Between two collapsed boards, a mound of ash stirred, and then she saw the last kitten, almost unrecognizable beneath the soot, trapped, his eyes half open, the first signs of life emerging right there, in the middle of death. She got closer, pushed her snout between the charred planks, pressed with her body. The ember burned her. She recoiled, came back, pushed again, until one of the boards gave and rolled aside. The kitten, still trembling, turned toward the mother's warmth. She grabbed him by the scruff one last time. A piece of ceiling fell behind her. The structure groaned. Death passed close, very close, but she did not stop. With the kitten in her jaws, she exited through the same crack she had entered. Slower, more wounded, but still standing. The man saw her return, dropped to his knees again, voice trembling, phone still in hand. She went in, again. My God. She went back, for one more, and now, yes, the 7 were together, lying in a patch of blackened earth, beside the smoldering ruin of a house, and in the center, her, more beast than cat, more mother than any human, more legend than reality. And for the first time she collapsed into silence. But it wasn't surrender, it was peace, because she had fulfilled the mission of a lifetime, the reason for pain, the return to hell, all for one final meow. The day dissolved into a thick grey mist that swallowed streets, lampposts and corners. The heat from the fire still lingered in the air like a warm, silent ghost, even as the first raindrops tried in vain to erase the memory of what had happened. Among the charred ruins of the house, smoke rose like a mute prayer. It was there, in that place where the fire had roared and retreated, that the 7 kittens now rested, together but trembling, pressed against their mother's body, as if each one still fought to understand what the world was outside the flames. But something was different in that silence, something missing, something sharp broken. The cat didn't move. Her body lay stretched over the kittens, like a living and dying tent at the same time. Burned skin, wounded paws, eyes half closed and lifeless. She breathed, but each breath was a whisper that felt like the last. Her dry tongue hung slightly from her mouth. Her tail twitched in a faint, involuntary spasm, as if the body still battled the full collapse. The kittens clung to her, but she didn't respond. She didn't lick. She didn't purr. She just remained there, like a sculpture made of pain, exhaustion, and a mission fulfilled. Then, a meow pierced the air from an impossible place. A thin, long, sorrowful sound, dragging with it all the world's loss. It wasn't from any of the 7, it came from inside the house. But how? All had been carried out. All were here. 7. Counted. Verified. But the mother moved her ear. Her breath stuttered for a moment. Her left eye opened. A sliver of light burned her retina. But she saw. She heard. And in that second, she understood. There was an 8th. Perhaps a stillborn who had clung to life. Perhaps one forgotten in the chaos. Perhaps a final birth in the very moment of collapse. It didn't matter. The meow was real, and it was a call. And to her, every cry from a child is a command to die, if needed. The cat tried to rise. Her limbs failed. Tried again. Her head slumped to the side. The white-bearded man, now joined by a firefighter, shouted, "She's trying to get up. Is there another one inside?" The firefighter hesitated. The house still trembled. The heat was heavy. But the meow came again. A long, desperate cry muffled by charred walls. The firefighter looked at the cat, then at the house. He drew his flashlight and went in. Inside, the floor was dark, sticky. The scorched planks cracked under his boots. He advanced slowly, barely breathing. The meow grew louder. It came from a hidden corner between 2 collapsed beams. He crouched, lit the space, and saw a kitten, still with its umbilical cord wrapped in a melted piece of cloth. That was the source of the final meow, the Chuaitha, the forgotten one, the hidden one, the final miracle. The firefighter picked it up with thick gloves. He rushed out. When he reached the outside, the cat was still dragging herself forward. Her body moved like a wounded snake, but she advanced. When she saw the kitten in the man's arms, her eyes, once dimmed, lit up. She didn't touch it. She only looked, recognized, and then laid her body on the ground and released. A single sound. A broken purr, rough, painful, but full of meaning, full of new ending. She had saved 8, one by one, from death, from fire, from her own body, and now the whole world saw her. The sky, now covered by low, heavy clouds, began to release a slow, cold rain. Each drop that landed on the fire's remains hissed against the embers, as if the world itself were trying to apologize. Smoke still slipped upward in shy spirals, streetlights flickered their trembling glow, and the city, as always, didn't stop. But right there at the crossroads between ending and miracle, time seemed frozen. The cat lay stretched out over the soaked earth, exhausted, surrounded by her 8 kittens, all alive, all breathing, all too small to understand that they had just emerged from hell, carried by their mother's paws. The firefighter who had rescued the last kitten knelt down. He gently moved the others aside and touched the cat's body with his gloved fingertips. Her body was too hot. The wounded skin pulsed. Her visible ribs rose and fell in an irregular rhythm. It was as if every breath was a Herculean effort, but she breathed. She was alive, against all odds, against all logic, against every physical limit. She had endured 3rd-degree burns, smoke inhalation, severe malnutrition, extreme exertion, and still, her heart kept beating. "She won't last much longer," the firefighter murmured, as if unwilling to admit what he saw. But she heard, and with what strength remained, she lifted her head, looked at him, not like a scared cat, but like a queen in ashes, imposing her presence without words. She didn't need pity, didn't want compassion. All she wanted was for someone to care for them, her 8, her reason, her legacy, her children. The white-bearded man, still watching in silence, removed his coat and laid it on the ground, face down, opening space with his arms. The kittens were placed on the thick, warm fabric, and the firefighter gently lifted the mother with a thermal blanket. The cat didn't resist, didn't fight. She let herself be carried, but her eyes, even half closed, never left her kittens for a second. Every step that took her away made her paw twitch. Her body screamed, "Don't take me, not without them." And so it was. She and the kittens were taken together, in the same improvised box, warmed by scraps of cloth, scented with soot, love, and sweat. On the way to the nearest veterinary clinic, silence filled the vehicle. Not even the kittens cried. The cat breathed slowly, but her gaze remained steady. She watched everything, and for the first time, she saw the world from above, through the car windows, not from under the wheels. She saw trees passing, red lights, street signs, and curious faces, but she didn't react, because all of it was noise. All that mattered was that they were with her. When they arrived, a team was already waiting. Upon seeing her condition, their expressions collapsed. One nurse wept. A vet said he had never seen anything like it. The procedures began: anesthesia, wound cleansing, respiratory checks, IV fluids, antibiotics. The kittens were warmed, cleaned, examined, all fragile but stable, all still breathing, all alive, the eighth included. During the night, the critical moment came. The cat's body temperature dropped. Her heartbeat slowed. A monitor beeped. Her eyes closed, and silence fell like a stone. For endless minutes, it was believed she wouldn't make it, that her body had finally given in, that everything she had to give had already been given. But then, as if in response to a kitten's cry escaping from the incubator, she opened her eyes. Slowly, painfully, but she opened them, and with that a new protocol was set. No one dared mention euthanasia, no one doubted anymore, because that cat had defied the impossible, and if she was still breathing, it meant her mission wasn't over yet. And when morning came, she was already making headlines. The sun rose timidly that morning. The first rays pierced through the clinic window like blades of light, slicing across the white, cold floor of the veterinary emergency room. At the center, wrapped in thermal blankets, tubes, sensors, and IV bags, she lay motionless, fragile, her body bandaged and her face marked by deep burns. Her closed eyes no longer revealed the strength that had sustained 8 lives through hours of terror, but her chest rose and fell rhythmic like an ancestral drum, beating again and again and again. She was alive, and that, in itself, was an affront to logic. Veterinarians rotated shifts, watching for the slightest fluctuation in her vitals. Nurses gently touched the kittens, nestled in an improvised incubator beside their mother. They cried softly, instinctively seeking her scent, even though she could no longer touch them. One kitten, Chinza, the weakest, struggled to stay warm. Another, the 8th, temporarily named Miracle by the team, still had his umbilical cord attached. They were tiny, defenseless beings who didn't understand the miracle that had just happened, and yet they breathed, because she had done the impossible to ensure it. That day, one of the vets decided to try something experimental, stimulating the cat's nervous system with her kitten's sounds. She recorded their meows, amplified them, and played them softly by the cat's ear, which until then showed no visible reaction. For hours, nothing happened, until nightfall when something unprecedented occurred. The cat's tail moved, first a tremor, then a slow drag, and finally a sigh, long, drawn out, deep, as if her entire body, for the first time, realized it had survived. The team looked at each other in disbelief. No one said a word, but everyone understood. She was coming back. The return was slow. In the following hours, her eyes opened slightly. Her gaze was still cloudy, but not aimless. When she saw the kittens beside her, she tried to move her head. She cried out, a hoarse, broken meow, but real, a sound never before heard in that clinic. And the kittens, they responded, all at once, as if an invisible wave connected them in a current of affection and recognition. They still couldn't see, but they knew she was there. Blood recognizes blood. Instinct recognizes origin. Love recognizes everything. The days that followed were marked by more progress. She began to move her front legs, to accept small amounts of diluted milk, to breathe unaided. Each micro-victory was silently celebrated by a team emotionally overwhelmed. It didn't take long for the story to escape the clinic walls. One of the firefighters who helped in the rescue posted a photo. The burned cat, eyes half shut, surrounded by 8 kittens. In hours, the image circled the globe. She saved 8 lives, and now she fights for her own. The post went viral. Comments from all over the world poured in. Artists sent drawings. Children wrote letters. Animal welfare groups mobilized. Donations flooded in, and more importantly, millions of people learned that the cat had a name. a name given by the clinic staff, Esperança. Hope, because there could be no other, because that's what she embodied, because that's what she left in everyone who heard her story. Esperança began receiving round-the-clock care. Her dressings were changed daily. Her skin slowly began to heal. Her eyes regained their shine. Her voice, once a whisper, grew into a steady meow. And then, one day when no one expected it, she stood up, trembling, with difficulty, but on her own. She walked the short distance from her bed to the incubator, and with her nose gently nudged the door open. The kittens rushed toward her like rivers returning to their source. She licked them, one by one, with a wounded tongue, but full of soul. In that moment, no one in the room breathed. A nurse held back tears. The vet recorded. The world watched. The mother had returned. The image was posted on an ordinary morning by a small neighborhood veterinary clinic. There was no planning, no filters, no marketing. It was just a shaky photo taken with an old phone. A cat with a devastated appearance, wrapped in bandages, part of her face still marked by burns, her body partially shaved for treatment. Around her, 8 kittens slept in a pile, nestled against her belly like shipwrecked souls finding their lost island. The caption was short. Her name is Esperança. She saved all her kittens from a fire. One by one, she went back into the flames 8 times, and now she's fighting to survive. As feline hero. Within hours, the post exploded. First came local shares, then animal protection pages, then independent journalists. By 7 p.m., the image had crossed national borders. International influencers, news pages in English, French, Spanish, Japanese, all spoke of Esperança, the cat who faced the fire with her own body to save her children. Social media's algorithm turned the case into an avalanche. The hashtag #YouHeroicEsperança soared into trending topics, and with it came questions, donations, tributes, interviews, as if the entire world for a brief moment rediscovered what true love really is. The veterinary hospital received a flood of calls. People from all corners wanted to help. Some offered to adopt the kittens. Others sent money for lifetime care. An artist from Slovenia sent a watercolor painting of the rescue scene. A child from Colombia drew a poster with the words "Mamita Valiente" and asked to mail it to the clinic. A public school organized a symbolic fundraiser to help buy milk for the kittens. A filmmaker suggested making a documentary, and just like that, Esperança was no longer just a cat. She was a symbol, a headline, an icon. But the most touching moment happened offline. When the images reached a TV station, a reporter visited the scene of the fire. Live on air, he showed the ruins of the house, the charred wood, the remnants of the oil barrel still standing. And there, among the debris, he found something no one expected: the blanket where the kittens were born. Soaked, scorched, but recognizable. When he picked it up, the reporter cried. And at that moment, thousands cried with him. Because this wasn't just a cat story. It was the story of something everyone carries deep inside, the instinct to protect what we love, even when everything around us is burning. Esperança began receiving visitors. Children wanted to meet her. Elderly folks left flowers at the clinic's door. The city's mayor had a plaque installed at the site of the fire. Here, a 4-legged legend was born. Animal welfare organizations launched campaigns in her name. And a street artist painted a giant mural of her in shades of grey and gold with the words, "A mother burns, but never lets go." Despite all the commotion, the clinic remained discreet. Her recovery was still delicate. Her burns were under control, but part of her hearing was damaged. Some areas of her skin would never grow fur again. And still, every morning, she got up, walked to her kittens, and lay down over them as if the fire had never existed. As if all that truly mattered in the end was the warmth of those tiny bodies, the sound of their peaceful breathing, the soft mews she knew by heart. And so, in silence, Esperança became something no social media post, no journalist, no artist, no documentary could ever fully capture. The living image of strength born from weakness, of courage born from love, and of eternity formed when a mother chooses to die as many times as needed, but never to abandon. The days following the story's viral spread brought no calm. They brought motion, people, cameras, lights, invitations, but they also brought something deeper: recognition. For the first time in her life, Esperança was not ignored. For the first time, Her wounded body did not cause disgust but reverence. The scars that crossed her face like dried rivers were no longer seen as deformities, but as medals of war. And indeed, that's what they were, because each open wound on her skin carried the name of a kitten saved. Each burn was a mark of the most primal, irrational, and powerful love that exists, a mother's love in the face of death. Even surrounded by care and sudden fame, the cat's routine remained simple. She woke up early, staggered to the thermal box where the kittens slept, lay down slowly, feeling the weight of a body not yet fully healed, and then began the ritual, licking each one with her rough, wounded tongue. She checked every belly, every paw, every still-shut eye. The kittens responded with soft purrs, sharp cries, clumsy movements. They didn't yet know what the world was, but they knew what she was. Her scent was home, her breath was shelter. Her body, even in pain, was their entire universe. There was a nurse who never stopped watching. She quietly noted every bit of progress. She knew the names of all 8. She knew who was weaker, who nursed with more strength, who always slept on top, who trembled most on cold nights. And one day, without saying a word to anyone, she sat next to the cat and said, "You didn't just save yours, you saved me too." Esperança turned her face. She didn't understand the words, but she grasped the tone, and in an almost human gesture she placed her burned paw on the woman's leg. These were the moments that escaped cameras, that didn't go viral, that didn't make headlines. But it was there, in the silence between two broken beings, that the true magnitude of this cat was revealed. She wasn't just a symbol, she was a healing presence, a living proof that pain is not the end. It's passage, it's testimony. As weeks passed, the kittens opened their eyes. They began to walk, to play, to climb their mother's body like a sacred mountain. They bit her ears, scratched her tail, burrowed their heads into her neck, and she allowed it all. She never growled, never pushed them away, even when it hurt, even when she bled, even when she could barely breathe, because for her, pain had lost its power. She had already met the worst, the fire, the abandonment, death knocking at her door. Everything that came after was a gift. Her scars, now dry, began to take on their final forms. Part of her face would never grow fur again. The tip of her right ear was gone. The skin around her hind legs had hardened like old leather. But her eyes began to shine again. Not with the wild glow of before, but with a serene, ancient light, almost human. The look of someone who had seen what no one should, and came back, of someone who lost almost everything, but chose to keep going. One day the clinic received a visit from a man, silent, white-haired. He held in his hands a piece of burned cloth, the same blanket found in the rubble. Without a word, he knelt and placed it inside the box where Esperança slept. She woke, sniffed, and lay down on it as if finding a piece of herself again. The kittens piled on the cloth, not knowing why, but she knew it was the original nest, the first home, the birthplace of war, and now the symbol of victory. That was the last night Esperança slept in pain. The next morning, as the sun entered through the window and touched her body with new light, she stood on her own, walked to the kittens, and purred, a clean sound, steady, whole. For the first time since the fire, she purred without pain, without effort, without strain, and thus the cat that was once grey turned to gold, not in fur, but in essence, because now every step she took was no longer that of a survivor, but of a queen, a scarred queen but whole, one who loved to the end and survived to keep loving. There was no shortage of proposals. Once Esperança's story crossed oceans, adoption requests poured in from everywhere imaginable: Germany, Argentina, Canada, Japan, Norway. Some people only wanted a kitten. Others demanded the mother cat, and all 8. A businessman offered to build her a private shelter. A politician suggested making her the city's official mascot. But the hospital declined every offer, not out of arrogance, but out of respect, because they knew Esperança's story wasn't something to be bought. It wasn't a trophy. It was a miracle spawn in living flesh. And miracles are not for sale. The hardest part was finding someone who didn't want to own the story, but be part of it. Someone who understood that Esperança wasn't just a survivor cat, but a mother with a past that still burned, who carried trauma in her muscles, who trembled at metallic noises, who meowed in silence when she smelled gasoline on asphalt. A soul that didn't want luxury. She wanted peace. And more than anything, she wanted continuity, because her life only made sense with them. The 8. That's when Laura appeared. A simple woman with deep eyes and calloused hands. A nurse from a small rural clinic, a widow, childless. She cared for her elderly mother and had adopted 2 orphaned nephews. But what no one knew, what only she shared when she arrived at the clinic, was that she had once lost an entire litter of kittens in a fire years ago. A short circuit. She wasn't home. She came back too late. Only the mother cat survived, crying in the corners for babies that no longer existed. Since then, she had promised never to adopt an animal again, but when she saw Esperança, she just knew. She cried before reading the caption and said only one thing over the phone. If she needs someone, tell her I need her more. The clinic team didn't need to debate. It was her. Laura arrived with a large box lined with flowered cloth. She knelt beside Esperança and said nothing, just extended her hand. The cat didn't growl, didn't back away, touched that hand with her nose, then lay down, as if saying, "Now it's your turn to protect." The kittens stirred around them. One, Miracle, climbed Laura's leg as if recognizing an old memory, and there, in a moment, not filmed, not reported, not documented, a new family was born. The journey home was long. Laura lived 3 hours from the city, but throughout the ride the cat didn't meow, didn't move. She lay atop the kittens, eyes open, watching every curve in the road, every tree outside the window, as if she knew that now, for the first time, she was going to a real home. And when they arrived, Laura introduced her to the new place with the simplicity of someone who's never needed much. A shaded porch, clean water bowls, quiet corners, a bed just for her. But what Esperança recognized most was the scent of calm. For the first time in months, the air carried no threat. The kittens grew up there. Laura named them after feelings: love, courage, peace, miracle, strength, sweetness, joy, and silence. The quietest one, who always observed before acting, just like their mother. In time, they began exploring the yard, climbing low trees, playing on the porch, and Esperança watched them from afar with that ancestral gaze. She never caged them, but she never lost sight of them. She rebuilt her routine, learned the scent of her new home, the sounds of the new street, the steps of her new guardian, the voices of the children. And at night, she'd lie by the window, gazing at the moon, like one who had already seen the dark from the inside. Her scars never faded, nor did the spasms, but her body stopped trembling, and the look in her eyes, once guarded, was now complete. She was given no luxuries, just a home, and it was all she ever wanted. The city no longer remembered the fire. The headlines had faded, the videos stopped circulating. Time, as always, had covered the ashes with cement and forgetfulness. But for those who lived the terror, for those who were burned, scarred, and transformed by it, some places never stopped burning on the inside. It was a cold night, the sky heavy, one of those nights that warns of a storm before a single drop falls. At the old lot where the tragedy had unfolded, an excavator stood ready to demolish the final remains. Workers in raincoats tightened their helmets as the drizzle began, slow, delicate, like tears that hesitate. They didn't know what had happened there months ago. To them, it was just another rotten warehouse. To the world, a place long stripped of meaning. But to a cat, sleeping miles away, the memory still lived. That same night in the countryside, Esperança was restless. The kittens, now bigger, lay scattered across the living room. Laura read quietly, and the cat paced back and forth, eyes wide open, sniffing the wind that slipped in through a window crack. It was raining, and there was something in the scent of the storm, something that blended wet wood, cold soil, and a trace of scorched iron that took her back, not in body, but in soul. Silently, she climbed onto the windowsill, watching the dark beyond the glass. The same posture she had the night before the fire, the same silence, the same tension in her tail. But now there was no fear, only memory. And in memory, the last night on the street came alive again. Back at the lot, the workers began clearing the rubble. The machine pushed against the ruins, iron against timber, dust against rain. The scorched blanket, the one that had served as a nest, lay hidden under a fallen beam, just a rag, useless. But when exposed, it made one of the men freeze. He recognized it. He was the same city worker who, months ago, had seen the site be condemned. Now, faced with the soaked, charred fabric, he fell to his knees, removed his helmet, placed a hand over the filthy cloth, and cried. She went back in, over and over, brought them all out, one by one. The words came low, but laced with reverence. No one responded, no one interrupted. Even the other workers honored the silence, because something still breathed there. And it wasn't the fabric, it was what it carried. The story of a mother, a warrior, a soul that could never be erased, not even if every brick was torn down, not even if every memory turned to rubble. By the end of the night, the debris was gone. The blanket, however, was saved. The worker folded it gently, slipped it into a plastic bag and took it home. He said he wanted to give it to the woman who kept the cat, but he never did. The cloth stayed tucked in a drawer, alongside old letters and forgotten photos. Maybe it would never be delivered. Maybe it would never reach its owner. But that didn't matter because the symbol survived. And Esperança, that same night, slept beside her kittens. One of them, Silence, woke up in the middle of the night and curled into her belly. And for the first time since the fire, she dreamed. In the dream, there was fire, but there was also light. There was smoke, but there was clear sky too. There were tears, but also rebirth. And in the center of it all, she was there, walking through chaos to save what she loved. She woke just after sunrise, looked around. Everyone was there, all alive, all growing. And then she purred, low, long, continuous, because that had been finally the last night of rain on the street. Some stories are born to die with time. Others simply refuse to be forgotten. Esperança's story wasn't just told. It was felt, absorbed. It echoed in millions of hearts that never saw her face up close, yet were forever marked by her existence. Because what this cat did, and how she did it, couldn't be taught, replicated, or even fully understood. It was something instinctive, visceral, sacred. The kind of love that, when it happens, leaves scars not only on the body, but on the world. And Esperança left hers. Months had passed since the adoption. The kittens had grown. They'd been vaccinated, neutered, monitored by veterinarians. Some were adopted by Laura's close friends, but all stayed nearby. They'd visit the house, return on weekends, and sleep curled up with their mother when winter crept in. They were tied by an invisible thread, woven from instinct, trauma, and survival, each one with a unique personality, each one carrying within their body a living memory of where they came from. And Esperança, with the scars still visible on her face and paws, watched them all with the gaze of someone who had seen death and chose not to go. In the city, her image became a mural. On a tall wall, an artist painted a majestic portrait of the cat, surrounded by stylized flames, her eyes fixed on the horizon, and 8 kittens at her feet, a silent army. Beneath it, in bold white letters against the grey backdrop, it read, "The mother who went back 8 times, the queen who never gave up." Schools began telling her story in environmental education classes. An animal rights NGO used her name in a campaign against abuse. A bill was proposed to transform the old fire-damaged lot into a public square named after her, Esperança Square. Nothing fancy, just a bench, a garden, a plaque, but a space reserved for stories like hers to rise. Because in the end, what Esperança did was show, with her own burning body, that heroism wears no cape. It bleeds, it burns, but it never backs down. And as for Esperança herself, she now lives in peace, no longer a stray, no longer a clinic patient, but as Ndia, a matriarch. Each morning, she stretches beneath the sun, walks slowly to the porch, and watches the birds with respectful disinterest. Her days are slow, almost sacred. Sometimes she sees her kittens playing and seems to remember. Her eyes glisten, but her body no longer trembles. She doesn't flinch at loud noises. She doesn't hide from the rain. She learned out in the silence of the days that the world can still be kind, that even when everything burns, something can rise from the ashes. Laura, who never sought fame, began receiving letters. People from afar sent thanks, drawings, poems. A blind girl just 7 years old wrote a letter in Braille that said, "I can't see the cat, but I know she shines." And somehow, that said it all. Esperança shined, not with ordinary light, but with the kind that only those who almost went dark can still keep alive, the light of someone who loved to the limit, and then loved even more. And so, with no pretensions, no pomp, no ceremony, Esperança became a living legend, not for being perfect, but for never, not even once, giving up.